Welcome to the Empowering Industry Podcast, a production from Empowering Pumps and Equipment as the voice of the pump and related equipment industry. Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 59 of the Empowering Industry Podcast. I'm your host, Charli Matthews, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bethany Womack.
Thanks, Charli. It's great to have you back this week. Thanks, Becca, for filling in. But we're always happy to see you and hear you. I'm sure the audience is. So we're excited to be here with all of our listeners today. As always, thanks for choosing us and, subscribing and all of that thing. So you hear us every Monday when we release a new episode. And do us a favor and leave us a rating and review because that helps other listeners find the show. And like every week, we're going to cover something from social media, preview the news from Empowering Pumps and Equipment, and connect you with an industry influencer. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Okay. And this week, we're going to do it a little bit different because I want to know all about Bethany's week. She looked like she had a hard week a little bit.
I'm laughing because I'm just awkward and I don't know how to appropriately emotionally react, but it was a hard week. My almost 4-year-old now has bronchitis and he's okay. It's just kids are sick and that's what happens. But then he was home from school and we're trying not to get the baby sick, and he's got a lot of emotional needs at 3. And so he was on a couple of work calls. So I should start by saying, Charli, thank you for making such a flexible work environment that it's okay and that we survive, even if I am in survival mode. He did tell Charli that she looked very handsome on one of our work calls.
I loved it. I mean, anytime I get to see Bowen smiling and interacting on the Zoom, and he could hear me this time, which was even better, so I could talk to him. So I also was just interrupting the meeting, but it made my day. So anytime. I know that was distracting for you, though, trying to listen and all. And so we appreciate you just trying to be there for us because we had a lot to talk about this week as well.
Well, and it took me back to the start of the pandemic when we weren't doing daycare anymore and everyone's at home. And just a shout out to all the working parents at home that have young kids at home and are still working. And it's hard. And I see you, and I was there this week, and I'm hoping to not be there next week as we move on. But what about you, Charli? How's your week?
Yeah, so I had a busy week. And so the preparation for this surgery that I'm going to have is really, it's a process. I guess I'll say that. I was in a process week. I recorded a ton of podcasts. And so I can, get ready for what's going to happen. So just to let y'all know, I know I told y'all a little bit on here, but I start actually this week. I'll have a heart cath to kind of test and make sure that I have no blockages for my heart to prepare for an open heart surgery on July the 8th. And that is coming super quickly. And I am really confident in my team and thankful, especially Rebecca, who is our director, who is going to make sure everything runs just fine. She's going to join us and take place of Charli on the podcast. So we're super excited about that. And you have, her last episode, she did a fantastic job. So you have that.
I told her she needs to work on her Alabama accent before we let her back on, but she has a month to prepare.
She could just say Roll Tide. Just say Roll Tide once. And it'll fall in there.
Yeah.
But no, I'm really excited about it. That, and I say excited, that's a really funny word to use, but I'm excited that we're able to kind of go ahead and record these podcasts in advance. So all of the industry interviews during my recovery time, I've already interviewed. And so, so it's just going to be you and Becca, opening up the podcast, and then I'll still be able to, contribute while I'm out recovering. And so that's going to be about a 6 weeks recovery. And I'll just be listening in, and I can't wait. So it'll be fun for me to, be able to every Monday be like, hey, what are they going to say today? So anyway, on that note,
well. I will say, on behalf, I'm going to say what I'm assuming the audience is all thinking on the podcast, that, we are concerned for your health and happy that you are taking the steps you need to be healthy, because we just want a happy, healthy Charli in our lives. because you're so important to us. And, we will miss you for sure. I'm not, it's hard to think about the podcast without you in this opening. So I am thankful for the interview parts. And then just as a team member on our team, I'm thankful for your vision and putting the team together so that it can run as well as it's going to. And, I think we all just want to make you proud and
oh, you do.
Make
and
our
like
industry proud. And everyone's
Yes.
thinking about you is what I want to say. And you're going to have lots of prayers and good vibes and all of that coming your way over the next couple months. So
Yeah. And so I've written a little piece in the digital edition for June. It comes out on the 15th, but I'll also write something publicly. So it's not a secret, obviously. I just announced it on the podcast, but just if you have any questions or you want to reach out during that time when I'm out, Becca or Bethany will be able to help you. And I mean, they're running the show really. So, okay. I think that's enough. I think it's time. Let's get social.
This is where we're going to talk to you about either something regarding social media or something that we read on social media that I think that you need to know being a part of this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to invite you to our virtual meetups. The next one is going to be the Empowering Women's Meetup on June the 9th. That's every second Wednesday at 11 Central Time. Yes, I don't know what I was going to say there.
In the AM. We are not night owls.
AM.
Yes.
I don't know. Okay. Anyway, this was pretty cool. We have a speaker. Jean McDonald is a communications and business strategist. She's wonderful. I've had the pleasure of working with her. Kind of when I met her, I fell in love with her because she's this super queen of connectors, if you will. And she has this platform or thing that she's put together. I don't know what you call it, but it's called How to Fascinate. Okay. And it's similar to like a personality test, but I'll just say that she described me in this as the people's champion. And I loved that. So there's just so many details there. And she really does help people, has a lot of books where that, she's able to kind of be that connector. It helps influence people in business strategy. I mean, her book is called Finding the Fortune, and she goes into strengths and also your sales strategies. Anyway, all around great woman. And I'm excited for her to be introduced to our Empowering Women's group. Also, we have our Empowering Brands meetup, which is going to be Tuesday, June the 15th, every third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Central Time. And register, show up. I want to see you. So if all is well, I'll be there on these 2 calls, and I look forward to kind of chatting with everybody.
That's awesome. And on that note, you can get a shout out by staying connected with us at Empowering Pumps and using the hashtag Empowering Industry Podcast. And I did have one today that I didn't write in the notes. I want to thank my brother-in-law, Jeff Ash. He's a nutritionist and a computer programmer, and he has a couple of podcasts, and he's letting me use his podcast mic because my mic went out. And
she sounds good, right?
Right? I think so.
Absolutely.
But anyway, thank you for making the show run. I'll make sure to tell him to listen to this clip. And I think I owe him dinner or something. I'll make Mark cook.
Mark is a great cook, by the way. So, I mean, he's benefiting twofold here.
That's okay. Nice. Okay. On to an article that Charli and I are both really excited to share with you. It's titled Inclusion Can Start With You, and it's written by Ari Copeland. I like to say friend of the podcast, definitely a contributor for Empowering Pumps and Equipment. He wrote this article. It's included in our June magazine, which is coming out really soon. So be on the lookout in your email for that. But we wanted to share it here with you because June is Pride Month, and the article talks about how for him specifically during Pride Month, he finds himself having a lot of uncomfortable conversations centered around inclusion and equity. And that can happen for everyone about lots of different topics. And the point the article is trying to make is, at the end of the day, that creating a safe and inclusive, I quoted this, so I would make sure to get it right. At the end of the day, creating a safe and inclusive work environment starts with you. Yes, you reading the article. And
listening
when I read
to
that
this podcast. Yes.
When I read that, I was like, oh, he was talking to me. I need to do this on the podcast. And it talks about, you might be scared that you're going to say the wrong thing when you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. And you probably will. Like, you're going to say the wrong thing at some point, and accepting that and taking ownership of it and committing to learning and improving is really something we all need to strive for. So I want to say, I'm scared. I'm going to say something wrong while recapping this article or about any of the things we're talking about, but we have to step out of our comfort zone and learn and grow. And that's how we help make the work environment, more inclusive and a safer place for people. So
absolutely. And it does start with communication and having the conversation. So we're going to go through this article. First, you have to establish ground rules for the conversation. And I think this is really great that we have a resource, right? Because this is hard. It's difficult to have these conversations, especially this month. You really just don't know what you should be saying, right? And so I think this article that comes from Catalyst, which is a 50-year-old nonprofit, who's already been through this and established these guidelines for us. And so let's talk about that. Just talk about what we can do to have a beneficial conversation for everybody so that we can grow and be better. I think it starts with this. Well, it does. Number one, right? Assume positive intent. And so, you just think of someone who is struggling and you might, not know why, right? You don't understand, but just assume that it's something that they're not doing on purpose. Okay. They're not coming to work late on purpose. They may have, we had the example recently of, their daycare was closed, so they couldn't come to work. And so just first start with, okay, what is this person struggling with and why? And I think that that's really important. Ari adds that, you don't want to use positive intent to mask any problematic behavior. So you can't just use, problem after problem after problem, right? So pay attention to that in the patterns of behavior. But giving people the benefit of the doubt is so important, and giving them an opportunity to explain what's happening. So just ask why. Why is this happening? And assume that it's for good. Like, there's a good reason why this is happening, and what can you do to really help them? Because that's what you're here for, to offer the support. It's being a team member or a leader. That's what, I think is really important about it.
Yeah. And I think even in your own mind, as you're trying to assess your own bias, thinking about who you inherently just give the benefit of the doubt to and who you never give the benefit of the doubt to might help you point out where your biases lie.
Absolutely.
Because for some people, it comes way easier to me than it does other people, assuming that positive intent. Okay, number 2 on this list was to just have a dialogue. Focus on a dialogue and not a debate. And I like the difference in that vernacular there that you're using, because it's not about proving someone wrong or them being wrong and you being right. It's about being able to share the different perspectives that you each come into this conversation with, and then being open to your view being challenged. It isn't always about agreeing. It's just understanding and being open to their experience and being willing to listen to it.
Yeah, it makes me think about, there's not like a winner and a loser here, right?
Yes.
This is just, okay, let's have the conversation and get to know each other.
Yes. And as you're having these conversations, you need to be accountable, which is the third thing on the list. Determine and share a bias that you have that you're working on towards being better. And Ari does this in his article that he wrote for us. It immediately made my throat clench up as I was like, oh my gosh, I need to tell people what bias I might have, and I need to think about my own. And it's not comfortable. It's something that is hard to do, but you need to do and think about. And the example that he used in the article is being biased against, where people come from in the U.S. And I think as you're looking for them, you don't have to start with the big bad biases, that I'm sure we all have bits and pieces of anyway. But you can start small and, think of something as small as where people are based from in the U.S. and if you're really judging people based on where they live.
Yeah, it makes me think about kind of when I would judge somebody who was just like completely put together, right? There's like head to toe, complete. I'm like, man, she must be in marketing because she's head to toe, like complete put together. And it would, I could feel that uncomfortable because I'm not that person, by the way. If y'all thought I was, I'm not. But you have that, and it's just kind of innately in you. You're like, why do I think that? Why?
Yeah.
Why is that? So the other thing is to be open, right? We're going to have these conversations. We're going to make mistakes. We just need to know how to have the conversation. Okay, if something happens and somebody's like, okay, this is kind of hurtful to me, or I'm struggling with this, take that correction, okay, and apply it. And don't be afraid, to accept, okay, this is what they really feel, right? So avoid being defensive or invalidating somebody's feelings or experience. I think this is really, really important. And we have an example here. If somebody calls you a sweetheart, which people do that to me all the time, I love it. But
yeah.
Okay, let's just say if it makes you uncomfortable and you want to tell somebody about it, that's okay. And the other part of that is the person who said it. Don't get upset immediately. Try to think through that. This person is upset by it. So, let them know that you're sorry, you didn't mean that, that to upset them or to come off negative, and that you would try really hard not to do that again. It may come out again, right? You may say it again. It's in your nature to do so. That's okay, but you're trying to work at that. And just don't get so defensive and mad because somebody doesn't want to be called your sweetheart. So I think that this is really important to take people's time to get over something, right? Like it takes, if you do hurt somebody's feelings and it takes you a minute or let them have a minute, right? To be mad at you or upset, and just say, I care enough about that person to give them space and time so that they can work through that uncomfortableness, and give yourself grace, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be uncomfortable for you if somebody calls you out on something like that. It's uncomfortable for me anytime that I think about a bias and I think, yep, I did that. I've done all these wrong things, yet I can focus on it today and be better tomorrow because I know this about myself and can continue to get better. So yeah, there you go.
Yes, I love it. Number 5 is actively listen. And we talk about this a lot in a marketing sense. And what we aim to do on social media is to actively listen, where we're listening to what people are saying without listening to respond. So without formulating your perfect sentence and your perfect rebuttal to what they've said, but you're just hearing them and you're listening to really understand them. And if you hear what they say and you need clarification, you say, could you expand on that? Or tell me more about that first thing that you just told me. It really helps you gain a better perspective of people. It helps you strengthen your empathy as a skill that you need to use every day in these conversations with people.
Yeah, in everyday life too. I like number 6, normalize slight discomfort. So we talk about this a lot with getting out of your comfort zone. And I think that this definitely plays into that. Working through discomfort creates growth. And that's in everything. And so having hard conversations are uncomfortable, but you're growing during that. So anytime that we're talking about equity and inclusion and biases, it's going to be uncomfortable. So just go into it knowing that. Draw on these experiences from your own life when you were uncomfortable about something, and then you went through it and then you benefited, right? Like you learned something, you grew through that. I have so many stories about empowering women and having uncomfortable conversations. But at the end of the day, we all are guilty of hurting somebody along the way. And if you can understand that better, then you're growing. So I just, I challenge people, get in there, get uncomfortable, and, have an open mind. Like you said before, it's important.
And that takes some intention on the front end of a conversation or when you're going into places to really get yourself framed in the right place where you're ready to be uncomfortable and ready to have those conversations. And ready to speak up about things, which is number 7. You want to encourage speaking up, whether that's in your team, in your company, in your family. Because I know we're talking about this from a business perspective, but all of this is so highly applicable to my family and big family gatherings and how we have these uncomfortable conversations to learn about different things. And so that starts with, if you witness a bias, speaking up about it. I think that's especially important if you are the person that's not on the receiving end of the bias, because it's going to take you a lot less energy to speak up than it is the person that's on the receiving end. For example, that person who someone called them sweetheart. they don't like it. It makes them very uncomfortable. To get themselves out of that uncomfortable place, have the courage to say that made me uncomfortable. It's hard and it takes a lot of emotional effort. But if you're there and you know this about them, you can say, hey, that makes her uncomfortable. Let's not call people by that term.
Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. It does take a lot of energy of something that bothers you a lot to kind of speak up over that. So having those allies and just having the conversations on a regular basis, people will know that about you as well. So they can speak up for you.
Yeah. And in those regular conversations, you want to talk about differences in a positive way. The things that make us different, that doesn't divide us. It's the way that we talk about the things that make us different that does divide us. So you want to talk about differences and how you can benefit from them. Talk about them in a positive way and express, your appreciation towards your differences, whether it's different backgrounds, education, jobs, and all of their different experiences, and how having lots of different experiences on your team and your group and your family can really make your product a more successful product, not to mention, it just being a happier place to be and a safer place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Just making sure, for one, I mean, this goes to, I guess, how I want to close. If you're the supervisor or you're the leader, even a team member, right? We're all leaders, but that's a whole different story. But you can lead by example. And, we have a really great example on our team. Becca is such a great advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I love that about her. She also is a great advocate for self-care, conversations where we weren't having these. We weren't talking about these things and kind of bringing it to our team, which I really appreciate. And you want them to feel safe and to be able to come to that group, share this, share if there's a problem, share if there's a success, share if there's a really great article by one of your friends in the industry that you want to share. Like, they need to be open and have that safety to bring that to your team, to bring that to the conversation. So make sure that, you are being that example for your team members. And if you see that nobody is, then you can step up and be that person too. And it's going to have a ripple effect. There's a lot of things and a lot of different people on our team, different backgrounds, different beliefs. And that really doesn't matter when it comes to making everyone feel included, validated, valuable to your team. And that takes listening and takes communicating. And so I just encourage you to do that no matter what you feel about Pride Month or not. This is about inclusion and making your team feel included. So it's very important.
Agreed. And in this article, Ari links to a lot of helpful resources that you can use to help you start conversations, help you educate yourself, help you discover your own bias, help you talk to your organization about taking more steps to further their efforts for DEI, and just an all-around great place to start. I think you challenged our listeners in a great way, Charli, to make these changes and have these conversations. And I'm excited that we could talk about this here. And we also, Ari, you might remember him. He did an interview with us last year during Pride Week about equity and inclusion and how that can look, what that can look like in the water industry and with your business and what you can do to make things more inclusive. And so we're going to be re-releasing that episode later this month as a special episode. So keep an eye out for that, or scroll all the way back to the beginning and you can find him there as well. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that is a good transition to the news.
Great. This is where we're going to, I don't know why it's playing twice.
You wanted me to dance again. That's all.
Yeah. Me and the sound effects, we're like 50-50, but I still like them.
We're going to do them.
Because I feel powerful. Anywho. The news is where we're going to preview some news coming out on the Empowering Pumps and Equipment newsletter this week. We're going to start with the person of the week, who is Arthi. She is a senior product manager in cybersecurity at Nexus Controls. And I think you met her, right, Charli?
I did. I just met her this week and I just fell in love with her. She immediately made a connection on the call. And, I just wanted to get to know everybody on the team that we're working with. And anyway, I every now and then, you just have that connection immediately. So I said, I want to know more about you. And she was open and told her story to me. And then she told her story for you guys. So she's the industry person of the week. So check that out. But I'll give you a little sneak peek. She says, whatever industry you're in, and regardless of your job title, always keep the customer in mind and have a clear vision on how your role relates within the organization to the overall strategy. Super important. For career growth, always be proactive, seek out stretch assignments to expand your horizon and to break the glass ceiling rather than waiting to be promoted based on your hard work. Network, network, network. She's a prime example of what networking is. And that's what brought her to me. She just was open enough to share her story, and that really meant something to me. So you can do that too, right, Bethany?
Yes. And there's an example of Charli being the people's champion. So she can fascinate people that way. We want to champion you as well. So make sure you're nominating people or yourself. You could nominate yourself.
Absolutely. I'm game with that. I'm going to check you out before we just put you up on the air, you know. So do that.
There's a link in that. Yeah. Link in there. You just put a name, an email. We go and check them out and say, oh, that is a great person to highlight for the industry. And then we'll contact you to get all the information. So,
and I just want to add one other thing, because I do contact some people and let them know that they've been nominated. And sometimes they don't respond, and maybe they're busy. Maybe they don't feel like they're qualified for this. But I'm just going to tell you that you are. And so if somebody's nominated you for this, then you deserve that recognition. And it's important for people coming up, our next generations, to see you, to see what your job is like. Maybe there's one line in there that motivates and inspires somebody else. So it's really important that you say yes and be that role model.
You need something to be able to show your parents what you actually do, because they ask you every other month to explain what your job is. And you're just like, well, I do some
Here's
things
a link
on a computer. Yes, now you have a link. I'm not going to say that's why I created this podcast, but it is beneficial because I can send my mom the YouTube link every week, and she knows that I'm busy. So, win-win.
I love it. That's validating our work here. And that's what I do with Miss Carly too. Yes. I get to show her. Okay. So my news item for you guys is, can a stainless steel submersible pump cure your corrosion headache? Sounds like a winner to me. This one is by Industrial Flow Solutions. They talk about how often, and ask the question, I guess, how often does your submersible pump wear out and it's needed to be replaced? Are you having chronic pump failures, taking up too much of your maintenance team? It's time. And I think that's what we don't want. Okay. We don't want these like failures and downtime. And so corrosive materials in the water you're pumping can cause these issues and all kinds of other things. But I think that what they're trying to say here is that stainless steel could be an option for a solution to this corrosion issue. And so it gives us all kinds of tips on how to select a submersible pump. And so check out the article and let me know what you think, if it'll work for you.
Awesome. I'm going to talk to you about ACE 2021. It's a virtual event that's coming up June 14th through the 17th. So really soon, if you're listening to this podcast when it comes out on Monday, the 7th. And you can attend it virtually from wherever you are. They have premier education, timely insight, networking, and they really want to talk about bringing the best technical content that they can to you by these industry experts, and talk about how they can and how you can impact public health where you are. AWA is focused on delivering education and information you need, and at this all virtual event, you'll find opportunities to discuss timely water sector topics, innovations, issues, trends, network with people. It's always a great event, and I think, Charli, why don't you intro the
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Because this week I got to do all those podcast interviews, like I said, and I actually interviewed Barbara Martin, who is going to kind of give us the rundown of what to expect for ACE. And so, look for that to come out as a bonus episode. We're going to share that with you so that you have time to kind of review that. Go ahead and plan for, attending the virtual event. There's lots of networking opportunities. There's a lot of, it's a lot of diverse topics, really. Definitely diversity and women, so many women speakers, which I love,
That's awesome.
Presenting as well. So just a lot there. So take a chance or take a look at that when it comes out.
And maybe you're thinking, Charli and Bethany, I've allotted my 45-minute podcast listening time to you already this week, and now I don't have time to listen to this. It's a short, to-the-point interview that will tell you exactly what you need to know happening at AOA, that you have 10 or 15 minutes in your day to listen to get you really prepared for that event. So you go in knowing what you need to do.
That's
Highly
right. And then,
recommend it.
you're investing in your time management skills there. So you know what to expect, and then you can plan it out for the week of the 14th.
Yes, you always have more time for podcasts. Trust me. You can work it in somewhere.
Absolutely. Laundry and podcasts. That's what I like.
On to the industry interview. And we have a really good one for you today. Charli, why don't you introduce our industry guest today?
Awesome. So this is John Felix. He's the managing director of White Oak, and he has been actively investing in the middle market companies for over 20 years. But I found him through an email that was sent out where they were doing some marketing about how can manufacturing get financing. And I just thought that was fascinating. I thought, our listeners need to know about this, and to know that, it was a hard time for people during COVID pandemic, and they may not have this great, report to take to the bank, right? And this, what do we do if that's the case? And so as an entrepreneur, I know I've been to the bank trying to, get working capital before, and being like, I don't know that I have the right resources to be able to get this loan. And to have somebody that can help you, well, that was a bug, by the way, to have somebody to help you. And that's what happened to me. I'll give Phyllis a shout out right here at Smart Bank. She helped me kind of make a plan for that. And I think he'll do this as well for our manufacturing companies. And so just take a listen, be open-minded to kind of understand what he does. And maybe that can help you or one of the company and business owners that you know.
Awesome. And without further delay, here's your interview.
Hi, John. Thanks for being here. I'm so excited. Yeah, I am doing well. It's sunny today in Alabama, so I'm excited about that. Maybe not as sunny as you in California, but John, let's start by introducing everybody to you. I'm just now getting to know you as well, but I'm fascinated to have this conversation with you. But tell everybody kind of what you do every day.
That's a tricky question. So my professional life is that I run the originations group for a rather large private credit fund called White Oak Global Advisors. And my responsibility is to go out and lead a team of individuals, and I'm kind of a player coach, but go out and originate transactions for the firm. We as a firm have a host of credit products serving middle market borrowers from the very early stage companies, smaller in size, all the way up to very large companies, $500, $1 billion in scope of total revenues. And our product offering is quite broad and allows us to serve the financial needs of those companies, whether they be industrial, retail, manufacturing, service companies, what have you. We don't discriminate.
Yeah, and it really did jump out when I saw kind of your write-up about what you were doing, and that you serve the manufacturing industry. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But one of the things that I'm always curious about is kind of how you got into the industry and kind of made that connection with manufacturing as well.
The manufacturing sector, if you will, is so broad and all-encompassing. And as a lender, there are many favorable attributes that the manufacturing sector provides that a service sector does not. Many of them have hard asset collateral. Many of them have been around for a long period of time. There is a technological development that occurs in the manufacturing sector. So there is a somewhat constant refurbishment cycle or upgrading cycle of the equipment. There's the whole industrial Internet of Things. So there's a technological aspect to it. So there's always changes. There's always a need to borrow. And those companies that do well and are gaining market share and are capturing more wallet share for their customers are ones that need capital, and the capital needs of the manufacturing sector as a whole are the types of things that draw unregulated alternative lenders such as ourselves.
Okay, awesome. So, I have a little bit of background here being, a graduate in the business school and finance, but once we get into the nuts and bolts, I kind of get lost about how this is done. So for the manufacturer, and the things that I know about, portfolios and everything is that you need to have a diverse or a device. I can't even say the word, but diversified portfolio. And so I always kind of think about that. But for manufacturers specifically, how can you help them?
Well, for us, there's a number of products. There's a number of capital needs that manufacturers have. There's the working capital finance need, where you're financing the short-term assets of a company because there's a variability in their working capital cycle. Maybe there's some seasonality. Maybe there's some large orders that come through. Maybe they have to finance some raw material or component purchases, and they may not have the cash on hand to do so. And they will not make money until those components are fabricated into the end product and then sold. And then once they're sold, a receivable is created, and White Oak can provide financing, receivable financing. So there's the cycle, if you will, from raw material to work in process to the end product, which is sold and a receivable created. That is the working capital cycle that these short-term financing solutions that we offer can provide to manufacturers. Now, there's
Yeah,
also,
and I can understand that. Go ahead.
There's also, so that's on the short-term side, and on the longer-term side, there's equipment finance, equipment purchase, there's equipment leasing. There's generally a constant need for manufacturers to spend money, to invest in capital projects to improve or expand their operations. And we at White Oak have a pretty broad offering with respect to being able to service those capital needs as well into longer term solution, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in duration. That's a longer term debt to match a longer lived asset.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, it really makes me think. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, small business, and we have working capital loans just for security purposes more than anything. But we are paid quarterly, so I can kind of see that trend and see kind of how you have to manage your cash flow, and that being very important, so important for manufacturers as they're growing and producing products and what that looks like. So this has to be a challenging time. I'm thinking about the last year and all the different struggles around financing and trying to figure that out of what you need, all the paperwork involved. And what does that look like for a manufacturer? And have you seen like issues with that during this last year? And I guess moving forward, what does it look like? And what should they be looking for as far as financing if they are having some type of trouble?
Gosh, that's a loaded question because there are so many manufacturers who have been impacted over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. You think about what has occurred. Those in the oil associated with the oil industry, you've had impacts because of low oil prices. You've had those who have been impacted by the pandemic, and that some of those have been terminal in their implications of the pandemic and their operations. There are those who've been impacted by the freeze throughout the South, and many of them who I don't know if anybody who planned a pandemic, who planned for the extreme weather that they had in the Gulf region. But what has happened now is they're coming out of that environment and they're thinking, okay, what could I have done? What should I have done to prepare for that and or prevent that from having as severe an impact on my operations going forward? So after they've put out fires, not literally, but after they put out fires and solved for their immediate term crisis, they're looking back, they're looking and saying, okay, maybe I should have diversified my supplier base. Maybe I should have expanded my manufacturing facilities into a region that is perhaps not as vulnerable to weather variabilities. Maybe I should have diversified my supplier base, and maybe I should have had a separate location with a different employment base. I just heard of a story of a manufacturer earlier this week that mentioned that, gosh, I've got operations on both coasts, and one state had a materially different restrictions on employees returning to work than another state. So I was thankful to be able to rotate my production from one state to the other and have a lessening impact on how financially, my financial results for the year. So there's a lot of folks who are looking back thinking, wow, what if I only had done this? And what can I do to protect that from happening again? And in many respects, those defensive actions, they cost money, right?
Right.
You have to build another plant. Sometimes you have to hire more people. Maybe you should consider, subcontracting out a portion of your manufacturing or assembly to a different region, and then transport that finalized component to your main manufacturing facility. The end result here is that what we have found is the companies, the manufacturers who have been diligent about creating what we call optionality, having the option to shift your manufacturing facility, having the optionality to move your a labor pool to an area that's less impacted by labor strikes or COVID work restrictions. That optionality makes a huge difference in making leadership teams sleep better at night, but it also has a lessening negative impact on your financial results during a period such as that which we've just gone through.
Yeah, I remember, just people wondering about the supply chain, like, do I need to find somebody else to take care of this element? And then, after a year, the answer has got to be yes, right? Like, if you didn't have somebody that you could lean on, what did you do? You definitely didn't get the big fish, or the person that was waiting on you to complete that project, and you were waiting on a part or something. You're in a negative view of them now. So yeah, we're going to want to try to figure out, okay, how can we prevent that for sure? But then how can we grow? So I know there, not everybody had a conflict. Some of us, continued to grow during the pandemic, but you wanted to, maybe there was a pause there. Maybe there was, 3 months that went by where you didn't know what to do. And then you kind of, okay, we're going to relaunch this other company or something. What as far as financing and kind of the nuts and bolts that goes into that, there's so many restrictions and like, how long you live somewhere or work somewhere, to get financing. Is that the same within the manufacturing space when they go to get loans?
When a borrower approaches a lender, whether it be a regional commercial bank, a national commercial bank, or an unregulated lender or private credit fund such as White Oak, the longevity of the business is always a factor. You want to make sure they're established and there's a proven ability to generate cash flow. So there's the longevity is always an issue. But what many of these companies are going to be faced with today when they go out to source capital for their growth objectives, whether it be maintenance capital expenditures or growth capital expenditures, if they are undercapitalized or much of the money has been pumped back into the business and they have the ability to generate cash flow historically, when a lender looks at those historical numbers, 2020 is going to jump off the page at them as being a down year. And for many of these borrowers, the commercial banks who have been servicing them in the past may not have the appetite for a company that didn't do so well during the pandemic period, or may not have the appetite for someone that didn't plan well enough for the extreme weather that was riddled the Gulf region. So what these companies have to do is present a scenario to their lender, which is very transparent. They have to disclose, hey, here's what's happened. This freeze impacted us in this manner, and here's the actual dollar amount, a quantified amount that it cost us, whether it be top line revenues, cost of goods sold, operating expenses, paying their employees a hazard pay for them to come in during a difficult time. There's going to be a cost associated with that. It's important that these lenders present this full transparency. This paints a picture to the lender from the borrower, that the lender understands what happened. And then that lender has to ascertain whether, okay, we understand this is kind of a fluke event. I don't think anybody underwrites to a pandemic. That would be ultra conservative in their underwriting criteria. But if you go to your bank, you go to your existing lender with a case that presents what the financial impact was, and oh, by the way, here's what we are going to do, or here's what we have done to mitigate that from ever happening again, that makes the lender feel that much better that you were conscientious about the impact, and that you are going to be a good shepherd, good steward of the capital that you've borrowed, and you're taking the necessary steps to make sure that you can repay that money going forward. Now,
Yeah, and it sounds like, I'm sorry. It sounds like that, as you're doing that and you're going through kind of this process, you really need somebody that you trust, that can kind of understand your business. So I would think, somebody that's worked with manufacturing before would be a benefit to have them, be there with you through this process, because it's one thing to come and kind of give your idea of how things happened, but to explain, like, we just held on to some of the projects that we were going to do because we were uncertain. I mean, that is probably part of a lot of this as well, is just projects kind of went on hold and now they're ramping up. I saw where you mentioned recovery. Do you feel that we are in that recovery?
I think we're going to be in a recovery phase for quite some time. The lingering effects of the pandemic, the physical effects, the psychological effects are going to be around for some time. There is going to be a wholesale shift in how people look at certain parts of their business. What we found is that there are certain elements of the industry, certain elements of the economy, and I use the phrase that don't really deserve to exist. They're kind of nice to have companies. Now, people are making a lot of money doing it, but some of them, they just don't need to exist. And the pandemic forced all of us as consumers and business people to force rank the things that were very important to them as individuals and as companies. And those that were lower on the list were hit the hardest.
Yeah, and I think that is different from, depending on who you're talking to, right? What is the important? So it'll be fascinating to see how the recovery happens, what comes back, what doesn't. But we definitely need our manufacturing to be up and running and helping drive us forward. Big believer in that. So having them, have somebody that they can lean on and talk to and help them through that process if it's needed. And from your perspective, I'm sure that you've worked with plenty of people, so you're seeing that there is a need there, and some people are maybe not getting that financing, and you're there to kind of step in. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're absolutely right, Charlie, because our phones are ringing off the hook. There are companies who have been with their local lender for years and have a long-term relationship with them, but regulated commercial lenders can only do so much. And so our phone is ringing off the hook as an unregulated lender with a number of products to serve the needs of these middle market borrowers. We take the time to understand their business. We invest in them as people, the industry, the process, the manufacturing, the end market, because to be a bona fide long-term partner with a manufacturer, you've got to understand everything from raw material supply the totality of the supply chain, the transportation of the supply chain, going into the manufacturing operations, and then how that product is distributed and the ultimate end user and all the components along the way that contribute to a healthy, long-term, sustainable manufacture. And when you take the time to understand that, and you understand the asset mix of your borrower, and you understand the growth objectives, and you hear from this management team how they have protected themselves from the severe impacts of things like a pandemic or things like an excessive freeze or a labor strike or a malware attack. All of these things present vulnerabilities and they bring them to the forefront. And if a management team has come to us with a story and has presented their case for why they are a good borrower, we absolutely invest the time to listen and understand and get to know them and their business and their industries.
Yeah, and I think if people have survived during this, they got creative, and you're going to be able to see that in some of those stories. And I think you're just not going to see that on an application you fill out, and it doesn't give a space for like human and what happened during this period of time. Really, it looks at the numbers, and like you said, it's going to jump off the page. So I'm excited to hear that there are other options, especially from the small business side. I always like to hear about this kind of things as options for people to grow. Improving and growing during the pandemic is something that, kept me sane. And I'm really excited that we have that to continue with our manufacturers. So just as we've been talking, is there anything that kind of popped up that you want to make sure that our audience knows?
It's interesting what we have today in the broader sense of the finance community is there's a lender out there for everybody. The question is, where do you fit along the risk continuum for those lenders in their evaluation? And many companies cycle with the economy. And if you are a well-capitalized business and you have the cash on hand to survive through a cycle, that's one a characteristic of a borrower. If you are perhaps undercapitalized and you have to borrow in a down cycle, the risk profile is much different. But it is the message that I would leave with the audience is that don't despair. There's a lender out there for you somewhere. The question is, where do you fit on that risk continuum? And of course, as you move further down the risk continuum and your profile is one that presents more risk to a lender, that capital will cost you more. And so you have to present a scenario. Again, go to the lender and present the scenario. Be transparent with what has happened, because over the course of due diligence, they're going to figure it out anyway. Tell them what has happened. And frankly, one interesting proactive step that many borrowers are taking today is they're having their accountant or hiring a third-party accountant to do some forensic analysis as to truly how this last 12 or 18 months has impacted them financially. And they present a third-party report to their prospective lender to demonstrate what has happened and demonstrate to them what they have done to prevent such actions from happening again.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it makes me want to go do that with my business. I hadn't looked into it that deep to see overall how it's changed. So if people want to reach out and talk to you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Look, White Oak has I think the number is somewhere in the low 20s credit products, and all of them are represented on our website, whiteoaksf.com. And from there, they can get the contacts for the appropriate person that is responsible for the product that they're looking for, whether it be receivable discounting, commercial finance, ABL, asset-based lending, term loans, equipment finance, equipment leasing, healthcare, and the list goes on and on. So we have a pretty robust website with contact information for everybody.
Awesome. And just one more question I like to ask everybody this is, what do you like to do for fun?
I'm an avid off-roader and outdoor enthusiast. So in the back of my house, I have a fairly sizable barn, and I've got Jeeps, trucks, razors, motorcycles, quads. I have 5 kids, and we're all kind of adrenaline junkies. So when I'm
Yeah,
not
so you've
driving
had
my
plenty.
desk, when I'm not
Yeah, I was
driving my
gonna say.
desk, I'm out in the woods.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that you probably just had plenty to do during the pandemic. Just get outside and drive for a while. So aside from your day job where you're super busy with that, but being outside and having a good time. So anyway, well, I hope you get to enjoy that sunshine and do some of those activities with your family soon. And it's a pleasure to have you on.
Charlie, thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure as well. It was nice meeting you, and look forward to continuing our dialogue.
Awesome.
Okay, we're back. Charlie, thanks so much for bringing John on the show. I thought it was a really interesting listen, and especially those tools and tips he gave for how you can restructure your presentation to get financing post-COVID. And he talked a lot about the freeze and how that impacted a lot of manufacturers in Texas and the Gulf. And so you can always find something in these interviews that you can connect with and feel like you learned something about. And I hope that all of our listeners did as well.
Well, that brings us to the end of our show. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Do us a favor, subscribe, rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to us. And we've been getting a lot of YouTube views lately on since we've added the video. And I'm trying not to be self-conscious about that.
It's because they like seeing us smile and dance. That's what it is.
Yeah. But so those are fun to check out too. And if you're on there, leave a comment and subscribe on the YouTube channel so that you can see our other fun videos that come out from Empowering Pumps as well.
Absolutely. Lots of resources there.
Yeah.
You can always reach us at Empowering Pumps or using the hashtag Empowering Industry Podcasts. You can email us podcast@empoweringpumps.com.
I just realized I'm going to have to check that email when you're out, Charlie.
Yes. Well, y'all email her a lot. I'm just kidding. I mean, just email her relevant stuff. No spam. Okay.
And messages for Charlie to send to her, and I will pass along the good stuff. And like that, we'll be back every Monday with a new episode and sometimes bonuses in between.
Yes. And Becca will be joining us as well. So until then, be empowering.
Be empowering. Started the music kind of late.
We can still dance. Okay. I'm good.
I have to let the music keep playing now.
Oh,
so it gets to it.
I love it.